You're listening to the Building Psychological Strength podcast, Professional Edition. My name is April Seifert. Not only am I a doctoral level psychologist, but I've been a successful entrepreneur for a number of years and have learned firsthand that building psychological strength can have a direct impact on your professional success. In this Friday edition of the podcast, I'll offer you tools, tips, tricks, and information to help you become stronger, more resilient, and more successful. Let's get to it. Noelle Hancock said, make sure you're ready for this one. It's a good quote. She said, procrastination is the lazy cousin of fear. When we feel anxiety around an activity, we postpone it. Welcome back, friends. Happy Friday. You made it. You're here. I hope you're ready to do a little bit of work today. This is one of those episodes that's going to be a bit different. Typically I dive into a topic, we cover something in depth, we do a lot of learning, and that's amazing. But listening to somebody talk about something, learning about a topic when, you're listening to a podcast or reading a book, that only goes so far. What really helps is when you pick up a pen or actually go experience it for yourself. We learn by doing. And that's what we're going to do today. So if you're up for it, I would suggest having a pen and a piece of paper in front of you for this podcast, or minimally being open to, say, mentally answering a set of questions as we go through this podcast. My goal today is to help you dive into a topic that affects a lot of us. And you can probably guess what it is from the quote that I started this episode with, but we'll get there. Today, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into something that we talked about last week. So last week, we were finishing up our two-part series on our comfort zones, and we talked a lot about what happens when we step outside of our comfort zone. We talked a lot about how our mind gets uncomfortable, right? We start to feel anxiety. Our mind sends us thoughts and feelings that tries to deter us to come back into our comfort zone. And right there, you start to see an interesting linkage, right? We get anxious, we feel uncomfortable, we feel uncertain, unfamiliar, and as a result, our mind comes back and it says, whoa, I don't like what you're doing. I'm going to do what I can to keep you from continuing on in this behavior or in this task or in this action. Very similar situation today when we talk about procrastination. Because procrastination, it's a simple concept to think about, but it can be very complex when you dig a bit deeper. And that's what I want to do today. Many times, not always, but many times, procrastination is deeply rooted in fear and anxiety. Now, before you discount that, you might be thinking, okay, no. I'm just a procrastinator. This doesn't have anything to do with me. This episode is not for me. I'm not going to get anything out of it. Before you discount it for yourself, just listen to the rest of this episode. It's going to be a relatively short one. I want you to listen to it because, again, this is one of those relatively simple topics, procrastination in this case, that becomes very multifaceted. There are layers underneath it for many of us that if you don't, quote, do the work, if you don't peel back those layers for yourself, it can be very easy to only see it as the surface level issue that it is. But rather, if you do the work that I want you to try today, you can find that there's a deeper seated issue there that once you work to resolve it, and minimally, once you just understand it, you start to feel some ease with that surface level issue that you don't get if you go a bit deeper. So I'm hoping you're willing to take that deeper dive today in this episode. Now, today we're going to be unpacking an issue that you might have. And I say it so generally like that because I want you to think about something that you might be procrastinating, a topic that, or a task or an action that you might be waiting for the right moment or waiting for information or simply just trying to avoid doing I want you to think about whatever task that is for you. Or I want you to think about the last thing that you procrastinated. Maybe you've overcome it now. Maybe there's not something on your plate right now, but there's something in the recent past that you can use for the purpose of this exercise. Whatever it is, whichever camp you're in, I want you to get that situation clear in your mind. I want you to think about that task, that action, and go into it in detail. What was it? What were you being asked to do, or what were you needing to do? Think about the qualities of that task. What skill set did it rely on? Were you under a time crunch? How did that time crunch feel? Was it spacious or was it quick? Who were the people who were involved? Were those people you cared about? Did their judgments of you matter? Ask yourselves those questions to get really clear in your mind the situation that you were in. And for a little bit now, just heads up, I'm going to be asking you to do a little bit of unpacking about that situation. So you might find yourself needing some extra time in between these questions that I'm going to ask you. Just hit pause. This is meant to be a helpful exercise to help guide you through an issue or a situation using a set of questions that, a neutral third party, me, is going to ask you. So feel free to hit pause, take the time you need to dive in and fully answer these questions. So now you've got that situation, that task, that action clear in your mind. What was it about that task that caused you anxiety? That made you feel afraid? What was it about it? Were there certain elements? Was it the fact that there was a time crunch? What was it? Now I want you to think about similar tasks in the past, similar things that have made you anxious like that, made you afraid. Was that a similar type of anxiety, a similar type of fear in terms of the size of it, in terms of how it felt, or was it different this time? In terms of those tasks, were there similarities among them? So did those other tasks that made you feel a little bit anxious or fearful and thus made you want to avoid them or procrastinate, were they similar in any way to the situation that you have clear in your mind right now? Did they rely on the same skills? Were they under a similar time crunch? What were the similarities and the differences among times in the past when you felt this and this time? Now, this next question is an interesting one because I'm going to say something really obvious, but it's one of those, again, obvious things that has a deep core to it. We are all human beings, right? Like we're all human beings. That means that we aren't perfect. That means that we have a certain set of needs. We have some common things that we are afraid of as just basic human beings. And largely, a lot of our anxiety ties back to a set of common fears or a set of common needs, depending upon which side of the coin you're talking about. So as you think about this situation that you're procrastinating, this task or behavior that you are worried about getting started on or making progress on, ask yourself whether your anxiety is rooted in any of the following. Are you afraid of not getting the recognition that you believe you deserve for that task? What about a lack of acceptance? Are you afraid that other people won't accept you for something having to do with that task? What about a fear of judgment? Oh, this one's a core one for people. If I go forward and it goes well or it doesn't go well, people are going to judge me. If I don't do it in the right way, even if I succeed and I get done, people will judge me. Is there a fear of judgment there? Fear of failure. The second cousin of the fear of failure is the fear of not being perfect. So you didn't fail. You just didn't do it perfectly. Is there any aspect there? What about a fear of success? Oh my gosh, what if I do this well? What if it goes well? I can't keep that up. We talked about this a couple weeks ago around the fear of success and how sneaky that can be. Or what about simply one of the scariest things possible for human beings, a simple fear of uncertainty. If you pull back the layers of that thing that you're avoiding, are any of those elements true for that behavior or that action? My guess is that you'll find some yeses there. And you'll also find some insight there. Because it means that it's not really the task that you're afraid of. It's these fears and uncertainties and needs, basic human needs. Another question. Maybe there's some fear and anxiety there about taking this action. What is the worst possible outcome? What is the worst thing you can possibly think of that could happen as a result of it? And now last week, just going back and making a couple of connections here, we talked about how stepping outside of our comfort zone, our familiarity zone, the zone of things that our mind knows are not lethal to us because we've experienced them a number of times and we haven't died. Stepping outside of our comfort zone, it creates friction in our mind that makes it send us thoughts and feelings that deter us from continuing forward. So it tells us things like people are going to judge you, you're not going to be able to do it well, this isn't going to go perfectly, even if you do succeed, you're not going to be able to keep it up, people are seeing you, they're not accepting you, all of those things. Our mind tells us all those things and it makes us feel anxiety. It does that to keep us back in line, back in our comfort zone. But here's the thing, we can defy our minds. This is one of those fundamental things that I wish people truly understood and understood the myriad of times and situations when this applies. You do not have to listen to the thoughts that your mind sends you, and I'm going to prove it to you. I want you to think of a time that you were in a meeting at work, or maybe you were in church, or maybe you were in a public place with people who mattered and you couldn't just get up and leave, but you had to pee, like bad. You had to pee. You had to go to the bathroom and your body and everything about the situation, all you can hear is your mind telling you, oh my God, I have to go to the bathroom. I have to go to the bathroom so bad. I swear I have a point. Stay with me here. I have to go to the bathroom so bad. What did you do? Did you just pee your pants? You just went to the bathroom right there in a meeting, right in front of your vice president? You just went to the bathroom? No, you didn't. You had a set of thoughts, you had a set of bodily urges, maybe even a set of feelings that were telling you, you need to go to the bathroom, and you defied them. We do this all the time, right? We have these thoughts and emotions and bodily sensations that come up as a result of situations around us and things we find ourselves in, and we defy them. This is no different. So let's start to think about a solution here. I just asked you a moment ago, what was the worst possible outcome you can possibly think of? Like, let your mind go rampant. Let it be that catastrophic thinker that it is. And not just you, humans, all of us. That's what our minds do. Let it go catastrophic. But now let's be realistic. What's the most likely outcome? You take a step, you do the thing, you do the task. What's the most likely outcome? Better yet, how have things like this turned out for you in the past? Let's tap into something even more meaningful. What would it mean to you to have this task behind you? What outcome would it bring? What would it enable you to do? And now these next two questions, I want you to pay attention to them because there's a reason for me asking them. What is the smallest step you can take to make the tiniest bit of progress? Number one. And number two, actually there's three. Number two, what elements can I add in each of those steps to make it more enjoyable? And number three, how can I cheer myself on? So smallest step you can possibly take to make even the most microscopic amount of progress. What can you do to make it more enjoyable? And how can you cheer yourself on? Because here's the thing, we are so quick to criticize. We criticize ourselves so quickly. But when we do that, I'm going to go back to that really straightforward thing I said before that's kind of complex. What we're doing in those moments is basically asking ourselves not to be human. We're saying, don't be a human being, be perfect. You should be able to just do this. You should be able to just make progress. You should have the motivation and the willpower to be able to do this. But guess what research shows us? Over and over again, modern research. It shows us that that's not how it works. That motivation and willpower, they are not the panacea we thought they were. They're actually really difficult for human beings. And if they're difficult for you, it's not because you're weak. It's because you're a human being like everyone else. But here's what we do know. If you can take tiny steps, make it favorable, enjoyable, and cheer yourself on, it's not motivation you're seeking, it's momentum. Momentum over motivation. We build habits, we build familiarity, we build comfort and certainty. We expand our comfort zone through small steps, not big leaps, typically. So what I'm asking you to do with these last 3 questions, what's the smallest step I can take to make the tiniest bit of progress? What can I add to make each step more enjoyable? And how can I cheer myself on? I'm asking you to admit that you're a human and set yourself up for success. All right, friends, that was a quick episode today. It was an actionable episode, but I hope it helped you get your hands around an issue that you might have been struggling with. Now, before I go, I've been talking to you about the Blinkist app, which takes some of the best, most influential, most valuable nonfiction books, and it gists them down into 15 to 20-minute summaries. Basically, in the time that it took you to listen to this episode, you could have gobbled up a whole book. I'm not saying go do that instead. I mean, that'd be crazy. This podcast is obviously important too. But just to give you an idea, in this amount of time, whole book you could have gobbled up. So in 15 to 20 minutes, you can listen to a series of blinks and understand the key concepts, insights, and take-home points from some of the most transformative books. And if you liked this episode, you might want to check out the Blinkist summary of the book, The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. It's packed with actionable steps that you can take to get started on some of your biggest tasks and goals, and you can check it out for free. I want to thank Blinkist for sponsoring the show, and because you're a listener, you can try Blinkist for free for 7 days using the link in this episode description. And this is important. For a limited time, if you click that link below, you can get 40% off a full year of Blinkist. 40. It's their spring sale, but you have to act fast because this offer ends soon. So click the link in this episode description. Thank you so much for joining me for this professional edition of the Building Psych Strength podcast. If you are an entrepreneur or a professional, current or aspiring, and you're interested in becoming more successful, hit the subscribe button. And until next week, be strong, be resilient, and be successful.